Welcome to our Innovating During a Crisis, COVID-19 and Digital Education live stream. Good morning and good afternoon to you wherever you are from. We are very grateful to have you here for this discussion. And now I will hand over to Max Cuvelier, who is the head of the GSMA Mobile for Development team. He will be the moderator for this talk today. So over to you, Max.
Thank you very much, Simone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So we're here to talk about education. According to UNESCO, at the height of the pandemic, there were 1.6 billion students that were impacted by school closures. That's about 91% of the global student population. And this is by far not behind us. There's still over 1 billion students out there who cannot go physically back to school today. So for a lot of families, that meant that their home suddenly had to double as a school, but also for quite a few as an office. Both parents and teachers had to organize themselves very quickly. We've seen a lot of bedrooms and kitchens that were turned into makeshift classrooms. And all the setups were obviously very different, but most, if not all, had something in common, which was technology. How did we do that? What did we learn? And also, what does it mean for the future of education? To help us answer these three very important questions and more, I'm joined today by representatives from 3 EdTech startups, which we've been very fortunate at the GSMA to have supported in the past 2-3 years. So we have Christelle from Eneza Education in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, Wesam from PrepClass in Nigeria, and Nathaniel from Ruangguru in Indonesia. Before I let them introduce themselves, a couple housekeeping notes here. I'll be, and the team will be as well, monitoring the Q&A section. So if you have any questions as we go through the conversation, please submit it there. I like to keep things interactive as much as possible. You can also use the chat to communicate with one another. If you want to test it, for instance, by sending where you're joining us from, don't hesitate to do that. And we might have to switch to French briefly at some point with Christelle, but if we do, don't worry, I'll translate the answers. Great, Christelle. Actually, let's start with you. Can you please briefly tell us what Eneza does? I was about to ask for an elevator pitch, but a lot of us don't spend much time on elevators these days. And so, yeah, so if you can tell us what the company does and how COVID-19 has impacted your operations. I think you need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone.
There you go.
Yes, so good morning. I'm Christelle Nyankwame. I am the country director of Eneza Education. We are a EdTech company which provides e-learning by SMS. So many students can access to all the content of national curriculum with basic phone, and they can get all the content, all the subjects. They receive by message lesson, and they can interact with the platform to respond to the quiz to learn more. So they can use the platform with any phone, anytime. Yes, and because of this crisis, we get more users because many parents looking for another solution to continue the learning. So it's very interesting, very good impact in our activity since this crisis.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go obviously in more details into the impact it's had on your business. If I move a few hundreds of miles to the east, Wesam, can you tell us a bit more about PrepClass and what's happened to you in particular in the past 3 months?
Okay. Hi, Max. So we're an EdTech platform that connects tutors and learners across the country, typically in one-on-one or small group classes. We also have a mobile app that helps students prepare for tests and exams, particularly the kind of exams they would be writing just before trying to go to the university. the crisis definitely affected us. A lot of our classes were these one-on-one interactive classes. Of course, some of them were being done online, but the larger majority were being done face-to-face between the learner and the tutor. At the outbreak of the crisis, many of these classes had to either pause for a while or they had to move online. For our mobile app, while we've gotten more free users, one of the challenges in that regard has been the fact that the crisis has actually led to a postponement of most exams. So even though there are more students who need to come online to study and so on, most of the students are the exams our mobile app prepare for are around 16, 17, 18. These are independent learners. These are not people who their parents would probably force to have to study. Yet the exams have been postponed practically indefinitely at this point. So even for them, there's just little incentive to have to do that. Of course, we've tried to innovate and adapt during this period. So we've started creating far more online sessions than we usually would. I would say the COVID-19 has, for Nigeria, for Africa, it's been a catalyst, an accelerator. So when you think about somewhere like India, where you have, say, Vendatu that specializes in taking online classes, and they've been around since 2014. And since then, they've always had online classes as a major focus, right? And for us, we've always looked at that with a bit of surprise because we've always anticipated the kind of challenges you would face if you tried to make your classes majorly live. So even before the corona crisis, most of our live classes, our online live classes, were with people who are trying to learn a language, maybe German. So such tutors are not easily available. And so in whatever shape, manner, or form you can get such tuition, you just have to take it, or people who are outside of the country. But today it's widespread that people are taking these online classes. There are questions and doubts about how people would respond and the longevity of these classes beyond the pandemic. But for sure, without the pandemic, most likely none of these people would even try to, because even as currently we have a few hundreds of clients on these online classes, yet we constantly get questions or even complaints on the client side, about their own internet infrastructure, their kids not being able to, hear or work around technology and so on and so forth. So there are these questions about how it would survive beyond the pandemic, and those are some things we're also figuring out. But for sure, what coronavirus has done has accelerated Africa's pace in accepting EdTech, core EdTech.
Okay. There are quite a few things to unpack in what you said, and we'll go back to this point, like the revenue model, the change in user behavior, and so on. But before we do that, moving over to Indonesia, Nathaniel, Ruangguru, and in particular in the crisis.
Yep. So Ruangguru is Southeast Asia's #1 online learning solutions. We currently are present in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. We aim to provide equal access to quality education through technology. Our main product is video learning subscription, question banks, daily live teaching, and we also have side services such as tutoring business, one-on-one classes as well. The crisis really did impact Indonesia quite substantially. Schools closed, as in many places around the world, somewhat abruptly. So suddenly we have 50 million students in Indonesia, and they all had to now study from home. And for many of them, this really impacted them a lot, because most students in Indonesia do not have access to other types of education beyond the traditional schools. So what we did was we launched what we call a Ruangguru free online school, which is daily live teaching classes for all grades in Indonesia. So students could log into their Ruangguru app, they could sign up, and they could join these daily classes that we run 5 days a week, 4 hours a day for all 12 grades, including all the 2 different tracks for high school as well as vocational schools as well. So we hope that this would serve as an alternative for students who are not able to go to school and to access any sort of education. They could just use their phones in order to study. So we have our teachers prepare all these classes, all these materials, which we hope could nothing could replace. Nothing could really replace traditional education in that sense, but could supplement their learning whilst they have to stay at home and study from home. So this is basically what we did. Around 7 million students have participated in our online classes. 1.5 million on the very first day of schools closing. So that's a brief summary of what we did as a response to this pandemic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what we hear from the 3 of you is that there's definitely been a boost, and I think we'll probably come back to that in terms of the impact on your business. I think you make a very important point as well, which is digital education solution will not replace schools, but they can supplement the learning path and so on for students. And actually, let's spend a little bit of time on your end user, actually, who are the ones in fact impacted by the crisis and benefiting from the solution. Maybe starting with you, Christelle, in particular, because you target students with quote unquote low tech solution, which have a very positive side, which means you can reach a lot more people with SMS, for instance. Have you seen anything in terms of the behavior or the needs that have changed during the crisis in particular?
Yes, since this crisis, we noted that parents support the user in the learning. So because parents are at home too, so they support more the children for learning. And we offer it free trial in this period, and in this period, we can note 100,000 visitors during 2 weeks. So we have never get this level of visitor before. So they change using of application too, because before they use the platform to review lesson, not to advance in the program. So at the beginning of the crisis, they used to reviews, and after 1 month, they use platform to advance in the program. And now, after 2 months, only the students who are in exam class is very active in platform. They use the platform to prepare exams. So during all the crisis, they change their using.
Okay, that's a very good point. Obviously, and I think that was raised by Wesam. Obviously, that the incentive of the exams obviously creates peak of traffic. And I remember having a conversation with Ruangguru a few years ago that were in seeing similar path. And I think what's quite interesting with your solution, as I said, is that it's based on SMS. But if I turn to Wesam, for instance, your solution is based on an app. How do you make sure that you remain inclusive and that you reach the widest audience, even though your product might be app based?
Okay. Yeah, it is. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's get Wesam this one, and then I'll come back to you, Christelle.
Okay.
Okay. So you're correct, Max. Our solution is based on an app, and that of course means students need to meet certain minimal infrastructure requirements, a phone, mobile data, and so on and so forth. So one of the ways we tried to expand that was we tried to speak to the radio station and see if we could do some level of partnership. Although something similar was already being done by the Lagos state government. So, and working out the logistics of the partnership turned out to be a bit trickier than we wanted at the time. So we allowed the solution to remain on the mobile app. One of the things we then did instead was for students who are having consistent difficulties getting access to the mobile app as regularly as they would like, we started to send out PDFs for the ones who wanted to subscribe to that. So you want a PDF of some questions and the solution, and you subscribe to a particular mailing list, and then you regularly get a PDF with those questions and the solutions. So without a doubt, like the corona has set everyone on like a very fast pace to try to innovate in ways that we would not have thought necessarily, but in ways that we couldn't have foreseen. So for instance, there are students who need access to these apps and need access to these questions and need access to the answers, but then they're also saying, I have to pay for mobile data. And, you know, with poverty rates in Africa, even paying for mobile data, sometimes people are ask you questions like, why is the app so heavy? Or even if the app is free, like in our case, if the app was a paid app, they might ask you, why can't I pay with my mobile data? And those kind of questions are really, really funny. So we've had to send some of these questions to people as PDF. You can now use it online or whenever you would like to access it. And that's one of the ways we've tried to reach more people who would normally have instead been cut off on these where they don't have internet access.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And there's also only so much you can do to adapt your model and add features in a matter of weeks, in particular in the middle of a crisis with the operational difficulties. That go with it. Nathaniel, in Indonesia, do you know how many of you mentioned 50 million students, which is a staggering number. Do you know how many of them have access to a smartphone, whether they own it directly or through their parents?
Am I on mute? I'm not on mute.
No.
Most students in Indonesia have access to smartphones, but building up on Wezam's point, I think we have a similar situation where mobile data is not cheap. It's not affordable for everyone, and we realized this early on when we launched the free online school. We realized that we can make it free. We can make it completely free. Everybody can join for free, but this will still require a lot of data consumption, right? You will need mobile packages that is sufficient to join a class for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So what we did was since day one, we partnered with 5 telco companies in Indonesia. I think they cover 90% plus market share on the mobile market. We partnered with them. Basically, we give out free data packages that can only be used to access content within the Ruangguru app. So students need only register on the the telco company's apps to get the free data packages. I think if I'm not mistaken, roughly on average, each telco company gives out 30 gigabytes a month. So that's more than enough to access the free online classes that we dish out every day. So that was one thing that we realized early on when it comes to the ability for these students to access these materials. Yes.
Yeah, that's obviously a critical point, and the reason why we worked with your 3 companies and broader was to try and identify how you could work better with mobile operators, and we've been very happy to see this type of collaboration happen like organically and overnight during a time of crisis. Christelle, your model is based on working with mobile operators. How has this partnership evolved in the past 3 months? Have there been like similar developments as what happened with Ruangguru?
Okay, this situation helped us to contract a new partnership with two MNO, two telecom company, and very quickly they were very reactive in this period to implement the platform in their network. So yes, telecom here is definitively the strategic partner to reach more audience, because when you are partner with a telecom company, they can promote the service with ways. So they can push SMS, they can boost your service, and it's very great to work with them.
Yeah, I have a friend who works for a mobile operator, and I was discussing this the other last week actually, and they said like all these entrepreneurs are opening digital schools. What mobile operators are doing is they're basically paying for the bus for the students to go to this digital school by making the data either free or cheaper, and also by making sure that the content gets in front of many more users. I think let's look a little bit more at the business model and the impact, but I just want to finish on the user. There's a point that's quite important, and I can see in the question, there's one question related to this, and I think we can't talk about education without talking about that, which is the safety of the students. Actually, I asked a very similar question when we were talking about health 3 or 4 weeks ago, just saying when you have to move fast in times of changes, there's always a risk of making mistakes. And when you make a mistake on the health front, it could cost someone's life. When you make a mistake on the education front, it can connect children with people with bad intentions. Unfortunately, how do you make sure that you don't, while you grow very fast and have to adapt, that you don't compromise on child protection and child safety? Appreciate it's not an easy question, so I don't know which one of you wants to go first. Gonna have to volunteer someone. I don't know, Christelle, you're the one who's unmuted, and it's a bit different in your case because it's an SMS model. Maybe the level of risk is different than like with a direct interaction through an app.
Yeah, but when you give the phone to the children, we have a more risk. So it's very important. In our case, we provide the content for primary and secondary school. So it is for children, for children. So we have the parents must support this learning to have a good framework, because if they give the phone to the children and they're afraid to discover everything, it's not safe for the children.
Yeah. And in the case of more potentially more in-depth interaction, like for instance with PrepClass and Ruangguru, where there could be one-on-one session, maybe starting with you, Wesam, how do you? I know you were doing this before the crisis. How do you make sure you keep like vetting the tutors and so on?
Okay, so before the crisis, we had a very elaborate interviewing process where the tutors would have to, be vetted. We check their background details and their history and their teaching profile. Since the crisis, like I said, we've mostly moved most of our classes online. And one of the things we also changed was, since the tutors don't have to go, to anyone's house any longer, the classes are being conducted online. But we also know that there is an infrastructure gap in Nigeria, a massive infrastructure gap. That makes it difficult for one-on-one or live calls, even such as this, to go on smoothly. So we said the tutors couldn't hold those classes in their homes. And this was as soon as the pandemic curfew started lifting here in Nigeria. Because what we noticed at first was different tutors were doing different things from their homes, and the classes were not necessarily at the standard we wanted them to be. So we have 4 offices across Lagos. We said these tutors have to come into our offices. What that allows us to do is, one, it allows us to completely bridge the infrastructure gap, since now we're providing them with power, which is still terribly epileptic in Nigeria. And to be honest, it's a concept most people simply cannot understand. if they don't live in a place like Nigeria where you could be speaking right now and the power could just, go off, or people stay days without electricity, right? So they're in our offices. We provide them with power, with internet infrastructure, with hardware like the earpieces or earbuds, everything that they need is provided to them. And then we also set a specific standard as to how the teaching has to go. So prior to now, people were doing just different things. Some people taught with PDF, some people taught with WhatsApp, some people taught with online live classes and so on and so forth. But we've now standardized that. And we've said, this is how things must go. This is what you must do. There have to be surveys for the teacher after every class, surveys for the student after every class, so we can measure the satisfaction level of students and so on and so forth. So we've put in all these guidelines that we make sure that they strictly adhere to ensure that we are delivering top-notch classes. One of the things we've also noticed because of the pandemic is that parents are a lot more involved in their children's learning, especially as regards their participation in these online classes. So you have a situation where there's a student on the class, but just behind him or beside him, there's a parent or an uncle or an aunt or an elder sibling that is making sure that he or she is doing exactly what he or she is supposed to be doing, even as they have access to that online class. For sure, like you said, child protection is very important. And so one of the things we've also seen is we have to do is not only educating the student, but also educating the parent as to, what they can do to ensure that their child's protected, especially during the times when they may not be able to be physically present with the child. Think about it, for instance, like how DSTV would have like child lock on some programs and so on and so forth. So what kind of apps can they install to help them navigate child safety when they have access to the internet without the physical presence of an adult there and then? So we're going to be doing a webinar in this regard in a couple of weeks. So we've seen that while there's an important, of course, the service is educating these kids, there's also the important dimension of educating their parents on making sure that the child is kept safe while they're online.
I think that's a very, very valid point, and that duty of care sits with the parents, sits with the teacher, and sits with the companies as well. And if you want to share in the chat the details about the webinar you're going to do on the topic, I'm sure some people will be interested. And I think what's quite interesting what you say as well, in having to basically provide a better environment for teachers and tutors. At the same time, you can add a level of control because they have to come to your offices and you've got better visibility on what they do. Sorry. So you've got more safeguards here. Nathaniel, in Indonesia, 1.5 million students the first day, 7 million active students on your platform. How do you manage the risk? In particular, as you've got older students on the platform as well, like teenager and so on, how do you manage this risk?
Right. Just to quickly correct you on this, so 7 million students participated in our live classes. We have over 15 million students in total. But this is actually an interesting point, and we take this very seriously. We take security issues very seriously. We implemented a child protection policy since last year. We wanted to make sure that parents are aware of their children's activities online. There are some risks associated with suddenly having so many new users during the pandemic. We have some features that allow for user-generated content. So we have like a question and answer forums, Quora type style forums where students can ask their friends questions on their studies. And we have a team of moderators ensuring that no inappropriate content happens there, that no child security is compromised. Another business that we have is the one-on-one classes. And we vet the teachers very, very seriously. We have to make sure that we ensure that only the best teachers and only and not the ones that might pose problems going forward. For those that happen within the platform, so we have like a chat-based one-on-one tutoring service as well. We ensure that we periodically or we routinely scrape through the messages, making sure that everything is in line. But yeah, basically we take all these very, very seriously. We want to make sure that nothing happens nothing happens that we would not want to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all appreciate there's no risk zero in that space when adults interact with children. But what we've heard through the three of you, vetting tutors, creating a like moderated environment, making sure the parents are responsibilized as well, and the children in particular when they're a bit older, so they understand the risk and so on. All of this together can help create a safer environment. Great. I think we've talked quite a bit about the user. Let's talk a little bit more maybe about your businesses. We've already kind of naturally talked about you working with mobile operators, but I'm interested to hear whether there are other partners that have been helpful, in particular in the current environment. Other private sector company, or maybe something to say about the work you're doing with the government. We know that anything that touches with education has to have a very, very strong compliance with Ministry of Education guidelines, for instance. Maybe starting with you, Christelle, are there any new partnerships or any strong partnerships outside of the one with the two mobile operators that you mentioned that have happened in the past 3 months?
Yes, we worked with educational ministry in Côte d'Ivoire, because all the content is agreed by them. So we work with them, and the new partnership is National Association of Parents.
Okay.
Parents of students, yeah. So we have a National Association of Parents, we mean COGES here. And when you work with them, we can have the data of all the parents in many schools, in many public schools, and we can reach them very quickly. And after that, we can try with humanitarian organism, I think, like UNICEF or another foundation, which can sponsorize some children in some area. We work with Jacob Foundation. We also subscribe for children. The children we cannot have enough money to subscribe themselves. So this partnership is very interesting for us, because they permit to give access to the children we cannot have money to do that. And with COGES, we can have a feedback about of parents, because in this period, if you have the support of the parents, we can have a regularly using. If it is not, it was a choice, so they use momently the platform to study. They don't use regularly. After 1 month, they don't use it because they think that they didn't return to school. So if you are parents, we can have a regular support. After many months, we send to the data of parents the reminder of revision. So each day, every day, we send a reminder to the parents, and the parents can call their children to review the lesson. So yes, it is all the partnership in this period.
And just a quick following question on this, whether you're talking about Ministry of Education or Parents Association, they're populations that or partners that are sometimes a bit reluctant to adopt technology or really want to understand what's going on? Have you seen a change in their mindset, in their approach in the past 3 months due to the crisis and the need to look for solutions and alternatives to brick and mortar schools?
Yes. At the beginning of this crisis, the ministry promote our service to public, because they work with them and they think that all the content is agree or is certified for the children. So many parents change the using after this, because they need, for all the educational content, they need some certification of government. So when you are partner with government, we can have some credibility to promote or to permit to discover your service.
Okay. That's interesting, and I think we're seeing this across many countries, not just in Côte d'Ivoire. Nathaniel, any partnership worth mentioning?
I could talk, yeah. On governments, basically in Indonesia, the education system is quite decentralized. So different government, local or regional or provincial and regional governments have different says on when schools would close and what platforms they partner with. We partnered with many of them and a lot of them even like handed out letters to principals saying, hey, we gotta close your schools, but you can partner with Ruangguru or some of these other companies, and that really helped us because a letter from the government really helped increase the credibility to the students, parents, and teachers to ensure their students use us. There are a lot of private companies that also, beyond telco companies that have been mentioned before, a lot of private companies, FMCGs, helped us with help support our initiatives, the free online school, and we launched a mega tryout because it was approaching exam season. So we launched a mega tryout. A lot of private companies helped us, supported us on that initiatives as well. A lot of companies also participated in the online school. Put up ads and all that to help us sustain the initiative. FMCGs, electronics companies, we were in good terms with many of them, and they supported us. Yeah.
Okay. And with them, any partners on your end?
Yeah, so we recently signed an MOU with one of the big banks in Nigeria. So we're going to from next week. So we'll have our logo on their own platform and the URL, of course, and they're going to be pushing some traffic to us. And then we're doing some things with some other companies, like companies that are into lifestyle, especially, and have a close relationship with parents. So when you think about like health insurance companies, those companies target the demographics of people that typically have kids, working class, and can afford our services. So those kind of companies, we're starting to talk a lot more closely with the government. So meeting with the Ministry of Education back here in Nigeria, and then soon enough we'll be looking at bigger partnerships, like talking to telcos and saying, oh, we want to be data rated or data free on these kind of services. For sure, one of the things that the COVID-19 pandemic has done is set up context for partnerships with EdTech companies. So when you're approaching an EdTech, another company or the government or whoever you want to partner with, the need for the partnership is clear on both sides. Like, they understand that the pandemic has put a halt to education, so they clearly see the need and even the good it does for their brand, to be able to support you and say, this is what we're doing for this brand that is going to help your kids resume learning during the period of this crisis. So it's been much easier to approach more companies and approach more partners, except for like the logistic difficulties and operational difficulties that the actual pandemic has created, in terms of people not going to work, or some people having to stop working in some positions within their companies and so on and so forth. So except slow down the conversation, and someone's replying oh, I'm not yet back to the office. I'll be back next week and I'll be able to take this up. But outside of that, it's created a very open environment for us to discuss partnerships with multiple companies, and some of those are already about to go live.
Yeah, I think it's great. As you mentioned, there are obviously practical and operational challenges in the current context, but to see so many types of partners, I mean, you mentioned mobile operators, banks, FMCG companies, parents association, obviously ministries of health, education, get involved. It's great, and it also proves the need for these solutions. Talking about this, and probably as we enter into the last third of our conversation, looking into the future a little bit. There's an interesting piece by Lee Crawford that's called the COVID crisis is not EdTech's moment in Africa, which some people might have misread as like not much is happening. I think that's not true. A lot is happening, but what it means is that it's also outlining the limitations of current solutions, and then the fact that there's still a lot to be done for them to reach scale. But I'm interested in your views in what you think that the long-term impact of the crisis will have on digital education in your country or in your region in particular. Do you think there's going to be a shift in the market or in the way people think about digital education? Maybe starting with Ruangguru?
Yep. I think one thing that we can take away from this, nobody knows what happens in the long term, but one thing for sure is that now everyone or almost everyone have been exposed to online learning. They've tried online learning. They can see for themselves. Before they might see our marketing, they might have tried the product, but not everyone. A lot of people still weren't exposed to what online learning is all about. Now everyone has tried it, and we do believe that this means that everyone can now compare, and they can see for themselves how beneficial it is to have online learning alongside traditional learning, and this means for us in the EdTech sector in Indonesia, we need to work even harder now to ensure that our content is better versus others, that our content is continuously is really helpful for the students, and I can only see that in the end everybody wins when we compete to ensure that we deliver better content, better experience for students to learn. Everybody wins. Students win, the nation wins. So I'm just excited for the future now that everyone's tried or at least has seen what online learning is all about.
Yeah, thank you. And Christelle, in Côte d'Ivoire, long-term trends?
Yes, in Côte d'Ivoire, we note that after free periods, only 20% of users stay. 20% accept to pay for education. I think it's very important point. When you have a free service, many users service because we have in the crisis. In good period, it will be not the same case, I think. But many people can integrate the alternative solution like a support of learning. Mm-hmm. And I think government should create a new content, video content of in different type of content. So video or SMS or PDF like PrepClass, and ed company have to have a wide proposition of service. So we propose SMS service, but you have to propose a mobile apps and have to propose another service which permits to the students to get the good content in the good subject. And also for the parents, I think after this crisis, the parents will be more implicated in the educational of schools. In this crisis, we don't, many parents in my country don't know the curriculum, the normal curriculum in each subject. So when you close the school at the middle of the years, they don't know that all the subjects which must be done after. So it's very difficult to support the children if you don't know the content of the program. So I think this crisis must change many things in the mindset of the parents, but it's not great. It will not be a great. Ce sera pas forcément une explosion financière pour les EdTech. So we don't have a grow up in financial way for the EdTech, but for the mind, it's a good step.
Yeah, and I think we'll go straight to this question after we hear Wesam of like what does it mean financially for EdTech companies. But Wesam, your take on future trends, and in particular what the current crisis may have had in terms of impact on these trends?
Okay, so yeah, just like Nathaniel and Christelle said, and I had mentioned earlier as well that the crisis has definitely catalyzed the adoption of EdTech in Africa. A lot of people who would not have tried it typically for like a very large range of reasons have at least once or twice now had to attempt to get on board. And one of the things that, parents appreciate having tried it is first, for them, it's cheaper. So within our context, for instance, where we would sometimes get a physical tutor to come to your home, if it's an online class, you might be paying like a third of the rate, right? So it's cheaper for them to get that quality education. And then also it's recordable. So the students have access to the content later on. After the class, they can come back and review and so on and so forth. And for sure, like in general, the general trend has been for the world has been towards more and more digital services and just internet adoption, right? And now we have this period where it's forced people who have to come on board in ways they would normally not have. So for a lot of parents, even though they know, okay, the schools are going to resume, they're going to be back to offline classes, and to be honest, many of them are super excited and they really can't wait for that. For a lot of them, there's still also that thinking that, look, we know that this has been the trend for many years before now, and we know that this general trend towards more and more internet adoption is not going to die. So even though we're going back to offline classes and, the physical classroom, for many of them, they feel they would like to keep their kids engaged in some form of online learning or the other, even also simply because they feel that's the general direction the world is progressing towards, and there's no need they should roll back on that trend in their personal lives or in the lives of their kids. So while, of course, there are some, factors that would encourage people to, even some people who have tried online learning and tried different things within this period, to go back to what they're most used to, which is normal human behavior. There are also definitely strong, significant headwinds to push people in the direction of keeping up with the culture of online learning that they started with during this period. And that's something we are also very excited about, and we're banking on is most likely going to happen. It's not going to be 100% of people who have at this time adopted it that will continue to make use of it for sure. There will be people who would stop using that, especially as Christelle said, when it's no longer free, the user base is probably going to reduce. But for sure, some people are going to keep up with it. Some people are going to try to get better at it. And that number is only going to increase over time.
Yeah, and I agree with the three of you. In my opinion, what it's showing is the potential of these solutions. They're not all mature enough. They might not all survive in the long term, but I think everybody's realizing that there's a lot of need for these solutions as we were saying earlier in the conversation, as a complement to traditional quote unquote education. I'll take a couple questions which I think are somehow related to what we were discussing. One I will I think from William. I'll direct to Christelle, which is basically about replication. And what we're seeing, I mean, we've been working with startups across Africa and Asia for a few years now. The issue of replication is always a big one. And in particular, in areas like education, where the curriculum is different from one country to the other, like there could be a big cost to replicate, and there's not always a really big incentive to go and try and replicate in another market. Eneza has done it. You're in Côte d'Ivoire. You manage the operations there, but originally it's a Kenyan company. What do you think is the way to help get successful solutions, in particular EdTech solutions, to replicate quickly to more markets so they can reach more people? Christelle.
Okay, to replicate this solution in another market, particularly in West Africa, because we have not the same curriculum in some subjects, I think you are obliged to work with Ministry of Education, because they have each years they update the program. So if you want to have a good content, you have to work with them, and to work with the teacher, we can create the content. Also, I think we have to propose the SMS and another way to permit to the children to learn more, even if they don't are in class. Because when you propose the content during school years, it is not the same that when you propose the content in holidays. So we have to adapt the content for school and for holidays, for different periods, for exam, and in this way we can't duplicate this solution in another country in Africa.
Okay, so there's working with local authorities and obviously tailoring not just the content, but when and where you make it available. That's a good one. If I move to Nathaniel, just because Wesam already touched on this, there's obviously the elephant in the room, which is you're seeing great level of tractions, and not just Ruangguru, some other EdTech solutions, like millions of users. A lot of it is driven by the fact that the service has been made temporarily free. What happens on the other side? What happens in 3 months, where hopefully the schools are reopened and your service goes back to being a paid service and maybe not subsidized by mobile operators, for instance, on the data side? What do you think is going to be the longer term impact in terms of adoption and usage?
Right. So the boost that's actually a very important point. The boost in users, we need to ensure that that not only do they experience the free online classes, but also they get a taste of what our actual offering, our main offerings will be like. So what we do is we ensure that they try some of the video content, the learning content that we have that are for premium users, such that when the pandemic is over, maybe they go back to school, maybe they will have to pay. They realize that it's actually worth it to spend some money to supplement their education with our services. So we needed to ensure that the content that we dish out for free is of optimal quality, such that they see the value of our service even when things go back go back to normal as well. And we have seen this because alongside the free live teaching classes that we dish out during the pandemic, we also have discounts for our main programs, our main offerings, and a lot of students actually convert to purchase the subscription, even when they have the free live teaching classes going on every day. So we see that this has been happening. A lot of students that have tried the application for free also end up purchasing subscriptions because they see it is much cheaper than a lot of alternatives that are out there, offline or online. They see the value, and they everyone wants the best for their kids' education, and when they realize it's not at all that expensive, and they've tried it for free, we do believe we will be able to convert a lot of these users into actual customers going forward.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the combination of lockdowns and free services has been a great tool for a lot of EdTech to acquire users. Yep. Those who will really succeed will be the ones who in 6 months will have managed to retain enough of these users to remain sustainable as a business, and also pay back for the investment that they've made during the crisis period. Unfortunately, we're getting to the end of the hour. So I'm just going to turn to you with one final question. Given the experience you respectively have in the topic, what would be your main recommendation to anyone who's interested in integrating digital technology to solve education-related challenges in a sustainable manner? I'll start with you, Wesam.
Okay, so I think my major recommendation would be that they strongly understand their use case. And by that, what I mean is with education, students have different incentives. So in some apps, some education apps are, for instance, exam focused. Some other education apps are focused on helping you actually learn, not just pass exams, but actually learn and build your knowledge. There are apps that are focused on giving you assistance specifically when you have problems, like you have an assignment to solve, have a particular question you don't understand. So they are more on demand, like at this point in time, you need help. I think what I would advise is you really, really understand your use case, because having been in EdTech for a while, I think that specifically is a huge make or break. If you decide you want an app or a solution that is tailored towards exam preparation, you need to understand your market. How many exams are there in your market? How important are these exams to the learners? Are there other ways they can get what they want without necessarily passing those exams? How rampant are things like exam malpractice? All those kinds of things should go into your thinking. And then if you want to do it for the actual learning, you also need to think through things like how widespread is a common curriculum across the country, or are you going to be having to build content for 3 or 4 or 5 different curriculums? What's the infrastructure like? What's the best way to deliver your solution across the different types of infrastructure, SMS, live classes, and so on and so forth? Like, you need to understand your use case. You need to know how to deliver the value and to deliver what channel are you going to use, and when are the users going to have access to it. Also, because education is an interesting market in the sense that you typically are not selling to your user. So the parent is often the one that has the buying power, but the student is the one who's going to make use of it. So you need a use case that beautifully integrates this very interesting symbiotic relationship where someone is paying for a service that they are actually not using, for you to have a commercially successful solution.
Yeah, I think understanding the use case is true in most businesses, but even truer in education, where you really need to design something that's going to work for the end user, but also get the approval and the buy-in from the person who pays the parent in the end. Nathaniel, on your end, one recommendation?
agree completely with all of Wezam's point. Just to add on it is maybe to really understand your customers and consumers, because our users are a different demographic from ourselves, right? We are 20, 30 something, and our users are from 6 to 18 years old, right? So what we think they might need might be different with what they actually need. So doing a lot of user interviews, user testings, usability testings, and really understanding what they need is actually very important. And also parents as well. A lot of us are not parents yet, or at least not parents of teenagers yet, and we need to understand them as well. So we do a lot of testings and a lot of interviews with them to understand their needs as well, and they are the ones paying. So that is very important as well.
So understand the use case, understand the user. Last point on your side, Christelle.
More patient. I don't know it's a good word in English. Passion. Patient.
Oh yeah, passion. Yep.
Yeah, passion, because we need passion to improve education in the world. We need really passion and time, and it takes time to improve really the results of education in the world. And I think to looking more opportunity to improve all your solutions. You have to looking more opportunity to promote your service and to find a way to interest students for learning and knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to end, Christelle. I think something that we're seeing in common with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with is that passion to try and really solve a challenge and make the world better. And it's even more important when you look at education and you're looking at preparing the next generation for our world. Okay, we're at the end of the hour. We actually run over already. So it's the bit that I don't like, that it only lasts an hour, because like looking at the questions and the activity on the chat and so on, I feel like we could have gone for another one. But time for me to thank you very much for the three of you for making time for this. I think it's great, and given all the work that you're doing on the ground, being given a chance to access your thoughts and your experiences is very valuable. So thank you very much for making the time. Christelle, you tricked me into thinking you couldn't do it in English, but you did amazing. So now you know you shouldn't shy away from any panel, webinar, or anything in English. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone who joined us from I see London, Kampala, Abidjan, the Cook Island, and then for the activity in the chat. I see quite a bit of content has been shared. Simone shared the link to our resources on EdTech, and there will be more. And then finally, thank you very much for the GSMA team who helped organize all of this. Great. So many thanks, but thank you very much for everybody for joining, and then we look forward to you joining the next sessions on different topics. Have a good day and a good evening, everyone. Thank you guys.
Merci beaucoup.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Thank you.